It's interesting. Maybe this is like, not to be like a therapist here, but I've noticed a motif in your story is that you went from one industry that is very male dominated, very oppressive to, women, people of color, LGBT people, etc. And then you went to a tech startup, which like, I'm sure the tech startup you work for is great, but like that's also an industry that has a massive, massive problem with this. Do you feel like you are drawn to those industries specifically?
That's a really good question.
You can feel free to lie down if this is like...
I know. I need to get on the couch. No, I think like... I do think... So to thrive in finance, I do think you need to have a certain personality.
Yeah.
There's like some baseline, probably type A, which I definitely am. But I think that what just attracts me the most, like finance was great in theory. I really like how it affects the markets or moves so much of like, it affects so many industries, right? So that's why I want to get into it. Other than all of the money that you can make an exponential amount of money in finance.
Right.
I have the same idea with tech. So I think that's what, finance was challenging in its own ways, and it can literally move markets, and it affects so much of just the world. I see that same wave in tech. Tech is taking over. Tech was taking over finance. Yeah. So I just like the things that have, massive impact. There we go. Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
There's my couch session. Now we're talking. That's a great point.
No, but I think it's very interesting because I totally agree, and I feel like that's also part of the reason why I was interested in personal finance and media to an extent. But I think that to your earlier point about a lot of these initiatives in these industries being very superficial, and more about like, I'm personally very interested in, we've seen a massive wave of female-owned, female-founded, or female-led companies come under huge fire for really bad employment practices, abusive behavior, discrimination, all that kind of stuff. And even just a couple years ago, all these same companies, even as recently as this year, all these same companies were getting, puff pieces and, getting highlighted in the industries and speaking, keynote at South by Southwest to highlight, women as leaders. But then you realize that unless you are fundamentally changing the relationship that we have to, workers in general and to each other, all you're going to do is raise up people who happen to look slightly different into the exact same power structures, and they're going to be incentivized to do the exact same things. And in some ways are even more effective at doing it because they can use their identity as a reason to say, well, I can do it, so you should be able to do it too.
Phenomenal point.
That's like my pet subject because it really frustrates me. And I think like when you see those, and tech, I think, is the new frontier of that, right? Because they'll say, well, anyone can learn to code. And obviously, you're proof that that's true. But in so many of these companies, it's not just that, my husband works in tech. It's a great example. 90+% of his team is male. Yeah. And I've socialized with them. It's 15 dudes eating chicken wings and talking about things that they're interested in. Yeah. And in my opinion, maybe, going out a little too late sometimes. But either way, like, just even the social dynamics are so, like you said earlier, you have to become a part of it. Yeah. You have to conform yourself to that. And there's no real move towards sustainable inclusivity. So what, in your mind, are ways in these spaces that these types of organizations can be more inclusive in a real way and change these dynamics?
I think it really starts with, like all of the systemic policies that they have in place and really like changing the thinking of, we need to bring more diversity to the table, where the default should be, we like should have that here already. Like that we shouldn't be looking to meet a quota or, we don't have enough of X, Y, and Z. The thought process should be, and always the default, like, do we have enough, like not enough diversity? This room needs to be diversified, period. Right. And I think like, that would be like a great place to start. I do want to go back to your point of like with the women and the puff pieces, because do you think it could be more of like women are under a microscope all the time, whether it be in tech or within finance? You know, everyone's waiting for that one particular woman to fail. So I don't know if it's like more of where all this information is coming out about these women, where it's happening all the time with men. Totally. It's just now, we have this woman founder, we're just waiting for something to, and not saying what they're doing is okay.
That is really an interesting point to me, and it's one that I've thought about a lot, because a lot of journalists that I follow who cover these industries have made that point. Like, these behaviors are bad and should be called out.
Yeah.
They should be held to account, but they are not in most cases doing anything that isn't happening at every single one of their competitors. They just happen to be a female founder. But I will say, I think the bigger issue is that you create these, you know, idols. You put them on a pedestal by highlighting them as, you know, an example of a sea change in an industry, or by, I hate to say it, but like automatically coding their company as feminist.
Yeah.
We saw this with so many companies, you know, a feminist version of WeWork, a feminist underwear company, a feminist luggage company, a feminist media, like all of these things were immediately coded as being not just, you know, female led, but also inherently socially progressive and inherently inclusive. And I don't think in most cases they ever earned that title to begin with, if you looked at their practices.
Yeah.
And these are all slightly different stories, but in general, what you can tell when you know, the story comes out, and like Outdoor Voices in a way are two really good examples of that, where from inception at these companies, you had these female leaders who were exhibiting really, really, I would consider, I mean, I don't want to use too charged a word, but definitely behavior that should have been addressed.
Yeah.
Inappropriate workplace behavior at minimum. And yet, early on in both of these companies, you had, I mean, massive amounts of press, PR play, for specifically the angle of, we have a feminist company now.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably a bigger part of the issue. Like, I think no one's ever been under any illusions that most of these male founders were not good guys.
Right.
They were not having a really friendly workplace culture. They were not inclusive. They were not, and they were never put on that pedestal. So I feel like not putting the female founders on that pedestal to begin with is probably the better way to go.
Right.
Don't give them undue credit.